discussion about.
Okay, once again, you are not able to enter into the kingdom of heaven because it would be impossible for men to do so unless you accept God. Now, accepting God and God's Word will be continued on to other passages that you would be giving all of your things away. Because only with understanding or reading God's Word would you get to that passage that shows this to you. And as this is revealed to you, you give your things away. It is of godly nature that this happens.
And just to bring back my previous first relevant question to this whole discussion here, what leads you to interpret it the way that you do instead of taking it, which is clearly set before you in those passages? I don't understand how you can reinterpret that. It's made perfectly clear.
Take yourself out of the modern world and go back and put yourself in the sandals sandals of Jesus, and think what he would be thinking. Try to emulate this person. What are they talking about when they're talking about in these passages? What are the additional passages talking about? How are they linked? Interpretation is not something, just of what you want to think about it. Put yourself into the mind of the writer. This takes imagination. They are parables. They are parables as in lessons to be learned. They are metaphors for which you to understand them in such a way to lead you. No. See, now you're talking not explicit commands, but yet before in these passages, it's talking basically several commandments that are part of the 10 Commandments. And in order for you to see these things, okay, it specifically says that you cannot do this without God. Yeah, it says it is impossible. It is impossible for you to do this as a human. Only with God do this. And then you see the additional passages as you read. So it looks like a commandment to me, whether you're trying to say it's metaphorical or a parable. It still looks like you do this or you don't see God. If you don't see God, you burn in hell. I really don't see this as not being a commandment.
But I mean, seriously, guys, what Christian is going to take your interpretation seriously? I mean, have you ever really thought about the fact that you don't believe in any of these things and that you're trying to interpret it? It gives you a little bias. I mean, you have a bias to interpret it a certain way. No, I'm not saying I don't have a bias. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is, why would I take your interpretation? Why would I take it seriously?
Why would we take yours seriously?
Well, hold on.
You see that we have a different view of these passages, and yet you're the one trying to convince people of your ideology or what you think this is, when other people clearly see it differently, clearly, and through logic and rational thought, this makes total sense. But then when we see that you are trying to interpret things, we can see that you're trying to take things in such a way where it softens the edges. Okay? and you want to believe the indoctrination and the reinforcement. Whereas we see a different nature to this. We see a harshness to it. Again, put yourself in those times. How are you going to convince people with just a kind word? You're not going to. You're going to have to enter in the acts. And this is where the commandments come in. Go ahead, Doug.
Okay, I just want to address something. My interpretation of it is called the English language. I didn't put any extra context to it. I didn't add anything or take away anything. I read specifically from the Bible on the passages. I didn't interpret anything. The only interpretation I did was English language to brain neuron. That's it. I mean, you're the one doing the interpretation by coming to the conclusion that it wasn't a command or that it wasn't to be taken literal. I'm not interpreting it in any way, shape, or form other than how it was written in the Bible.
Well, which is the same way as saying my interpretation is right and your interpretation is wrong. That's exactly what you're saying, Smoke Dog.
Oh, hold on one second. Reflectionist. Hold on one second. Reflectionist. You're saying there were no atheists during this time. You're wrong. Rome called all people that didn't believe in the Roman gods atheists. Pagans were atheists. Jews were atheists. There were, if anybody believed differently, okay, you were atheist to this God. You may have believed in other gods, but you were atheist in consideration to this particular God. And I would submit there were people that didn't believe in any gods. Most of them would keep their mouth shut. Okay, thank you. Go on, you two.
Okay, yeah, again, I stress that it's not my interpretation. By you saying that my interpretation is wrong, you are directly agreeing that the Bible is wrong. Because I didn't interpret it. I read it.
Okay, I mean, obviously this is not going to be a productive conversation because you can't understand the fact that every time you read a sentence, regardless of what it says, you have to interpret it. It doesn't automatically have a meaning. You have to interpret it in some way. If you can't understand these basic concepts, then there's no point in having this conversation with you.
Dude, I perfectly understand it because the interpretation I used was called the English language.
Well, what Credos is trying to suggest is there has to be a mental process going on. That mental process is going to have to be of what you've got into your head. Okay? You've got a clear head. You're trying to look at things outside of the box. Look at things from a position of what does this mean? What is going on here? Where Credos looks at things is how can I use this to, better myself? How can I use this to further indoctrinate myself? He's not doing this consciously. He's doing this unconsciously. The mind is trying to reinforce this God belief on a continuous basis. It's a mind trap. It's just circular reasoning to try and dig in deeper. Whereas you're on the outside of the box and you're not looking to dig yourself in deeper. You're looking at the reality of things. You're looking at more possibilities than he is. At least, okay, that Credos, you're going to have to look at the point that we are looking at more possibilities of what these verses are saying. You're pigeonholing yourself, where we're not. We see what you're talking about. We're just expanding upon it. We're making additional connections to the dots. These dots are there. The connections are there.
If you're postulating multiple ideas or multiple meanings and you're coming up with what you think is the most reasonable meaning for these words, atheist at large, then what you are doing is you are interpreting it the way it most makes sense to you. That's not what Smoke Dog said. Smoke Dog said, I'm just reading the English language. I'm not interpreting it at all. It only means one thing. How could it mean anything else? Because I'm using it in the English language.
Hold on. it is something that is so clear to him. Like saying the sky, it's a beautiful blue sky. It is clear to him. He's not looking at it through rose-colored glasses that would make it turn from blue to brown.
Well, it's clear to him, and what he's saying is that this is what it means, because this is what the plain English language means. And although I sympathize with his plight, because he's talking to somebody who doesn't see the same thing he does, he still hasn't admitted that he is interpreting the English language. He's using the English language, but he's interpreting what the words mean.
Okay, you're going off on semantics here, and you're dragging this off into a little bit of a different direction. You're taking a tangent here. All right. I'm curious, what the fuck are you doing?